What kind of person could do this? That's the question. It's the only one that really matters. We can talk about the town, the time, the victims, we can list the facts, but at the end of it, after more than a century, we are left staring into a dark room, trying to make out the shape of the man who held the axe. What kind of person walks into a small house on a warm June night, finds a family asleep, and one by one, crushes their skulls? Not just the parents, all of them, the 4 children, and their 2 young friends who were just there for a sleepover. 8 people. What kind of mind is that? To build a picture of the Villisca killer, we have to start where he did. In the house. The crime scene is his autobiography, written in blood. Every strange detail he left behind is a clue to his thinking. He didn't just kill and run, he stayed, he performed a ritual, and in that ritual we can find him. First, let's be clear. This was a man. The sheer physical strength required to swing an axe with that much force over and over points to a man. The nature of the violence, the overkill, is also statistically far more common in male offenders. So we are looking for a man. Was he a local or a stranger passing through? This is one of the biggest debates. Arguments for a local are strong. He knew how to move through Villisca in the dark without being seen. He seemed to know the layout of the Moore house. He picked the Moore's own axe from the backyard. It suggests a certain familiarity. He knew Josiah J.B. Moore was a prominent man, and maybe he had a reason to hate him. A local would have a motive rooted in the community. A business deal gone bad. A personal insult. A simmering secret grudge. But the argument for a stranger, a transient, is just as compelling. After the murders, the killer simply vanished. In a town as small as Villisca, a local man covered in blood, or even just acting strangely the next day, would have been noticed. Someone would have talked, but no one did. The killer dissolved into the night. This points to a drifter, someone who came into town on the train, committed his horrible act, and was gone by morning. A man with no ties, no history in Villisca, leaves no trail. And if he was a transient, the motive changes. It might not have been about J.B. Moore at all. The Moores might have just been targets of opportunity. A random, terrible choice. This is in some ways a more frightening thought. A personal enemy is one thing. A faceless monster who kills for no reason is another. Let's look at his actions inside the house. They tell us he was patient, and he was prepared. The killer likely hid in the small attic or a closet waiting. He waited for the whole family, JB, Sarah, their children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, plus the Stillinger girls, Lena and Ina, to come home from the Children's Day program at the church. He waited for them to get ready for bed. He waited for the house to fall silent. This isn't a crime of sudden explosive passion. This is premeditated, it is cold. He had hours to sit in the dark with his thoughts, listening to the sounds of the family he was about to destroy. What does a person think about in those hours? He brought his own small kerosene lamp, but the chimney was found under a dresser. He took one from a room in the house instead. He removed the chimneys from the lamps in the parents' bedroom and the girls' room. He wanted control of the light. He wanted just enough to see, but not enough to be seen. He moved through the house in near total darkness, navigating by a sliver of light. This suggests someone who was comfortable in the dark, someone who was not afraid. He was the master of that house, he owned the night, and then there's the axe. He used J.B. Moore's own axe. He didn't bring a weapon with him. This could mean a few things. Maybe the crime was an impulse, and he just used what was available. But that doesn't fit with the hours of waiting. More likely, it was a deliberate choice. Using the family's own tool to kill them is a profound act of violation. It's a symbolic gesture. It says, your own world, your own home, the very things you use to build and protect your life, can be turned against you. It adds a layer of psychological terror to the crime. The attacks themselves were brutal but focused. He used the blunt side of the axe for most of the victims, a deliberate crushing force. He only used the sharp blade on J.B. Moore, the first victim. Perhaps his rage was most focused on J.B. After that, it was just a task to be completed. He moved from the parents' bedroom downstairs to the children's room upstairs, one by one. He killed them all in their beds as they slept. There were no signs of a struggle, except for a defensive wound on Lena Stillinger's arm. She may have woken up for a terrifying final second. The others likely never knew what happened. This is where we get into the truly strange parts, the rituals. After the killing was done, the killer did not flee. He stayed. He went to every window in the house and covered it with a cloth or a piece of clothing. He wanted privacy. He didn't want anyone from the outside world looking in on his creation. The house became his private stage. Then he went back to the victims. He covered each of their faces with bedclothes. This is a very significant psychological act. Covering the face is common in murders committed by someone who knows the victim. Hey, it's an act of depersonalization. It can be a sign of shame or remorse, an inability to look at what you've done. I have destroyed this person. Now I will erase their identity. It turns a person into an object, but it could also be something else. In the killer's mind, he might have been tucking them in. A grotesque, final act of mock tenderness after the slaughter. A way of closing the book on their lives. He also covered all the mirrors in the house. This is one of the most debated clues. Why cover the mirrors? In some old traditions, mirrors were covered in a house of mourning to prevent the soul of the deceased from being trapped. Was the killer superstitious, or was it more practical? He didn't want to accidentally catch a glimpse of his own reflection. He didn't want to see the monster staring back at him, axe in hand, covered in blood. It was an act of self-preservation, a way to maintain his sanity, to separate himself from the horror he had just committed. Or maybe it was part of a religious delusion. Mirrors are often associated with vanity, a sin. By covering them, was he passing judgment on the family? Was he cleansing the house? The killer was in the house for a long time. After the murders, he went to the kitchen. He found a bowl of bloody water on the kitchen table, as if he had washed his hands. Next to it was a plate of uneaten food. Did he pause for a snack? The idea is almost unthinkable. To sit and eat in a house full of the dead. But it speaks to a profound level of detachment, a complete lack of fear or panic. He was comfortable there. The house was his. He also left a slab of bacon from the icebox in the living room leaning against a wall. And he brought 2 loaves of bread, still in their wrappers, with it. The bacon is another bizarre clue that has never been fully explained. Some have suggested it was a crude sexual symbol. Others think it was meant to be a lunch for the road, which he forgot. Or maybe it was part of his religious delusion, some symbolic offering. The truth is, we don't know. But it adds to the picture of a mind that was not working in a normal way. It's a signature. It's a piece of his personality, left behind like a calling card. Finally, before he left, he locked the doors behind him. He took the keys. This is another act of control. He wasn't just a killer, he was a gatekeeper. He decided when the world would discover his work. He sealed the house like a tomb. So, let's put it all together. What does this tell us? We're looking for a man who is a paradox. He is both organized and disorganized. He is organized in his planning, waiting in the house, controlling the light, covering the windows. He methodically moves from room to room. He cleans up afterward. This shows foresight and self-control. But he is disorganized in the violence itself. The sheer overkill, the frenzied blows that gouge the ceiling. This suggests a deep well of uncontrollable rage. He is a person who can hold a tight leash on himself, but when he lets go, the violence is absolute. This is a person who likely feels powerless in his everyday life. The murders are an act of ultimate control. For those few hours, he was God. He decided who lived and who died. He arranged the scene. He controlled the environment. This need for control points to a person with a profound sense of inadequacy or grievance against the world. He might be someone who feels ignored, cheated, or disrespected. In that house, he was the most important person in the world. He had absolute power. There's also a clear sexual component to the crime, but it's not straightforward. Alina Stillinger, the 12-year-old guest, was positioned strangely after her death. Her nightgown was pushed up, and she was bare from the waist down. There was a bloodstain on the bed that suggested sexual interest, but there was no evidence of rape. This wasn't about sexual gratification in the normal sense. It was about sexual humiliation and degradation. It was about power. For the killer, sex and violence were twisted together. This points to a man with a severe psychosexual disorder. He might be someone who is impotent, or someone who can only achieve arousal through violence and domination. This element makes the profile much darker. He wasn't just an angry man with a grudge. He was a sexual sadist. So, who could have been this man? When we hold this profile up against the main suspects, some of them start to look more likely than others. Consider Frank F. Jones. He was a powerful state senator and J.B. Moore's former employer and bitter business rival. J.B. had left Jones's farm implement company to start his own, taking the very profitable John Deere account with him. Jones was a man who was used to getting his way. He had the motive of revenge. He was a pillar of the community, but maybe underneath that was a cold, ruthless anger. The focus of the attack on J.B. Moore fits this theory. But does the rest of it fit? Would a man like Jones, a politician, risk everything to personally slaughter an entire family, including 6 children? it seems unlikely. And the bizarre rituals, the sexual component with Lena Stillinger, the covered mirrors, none of this points to a simple business revenge killing. It's too strange, too personal, too psychologically twisted. If Jones was involved, it is more likely he hired someone to do it. That brings us to William Blackie Mansfield. He was a suspected serial killer and hitman. A private detective hired by a burnout local investigator pointed the finger at Mansfield, claiming he was hired by Frank Jones. Mansfield was a violent man, a killer for hire. He certainly had the capacity for violence. But, again, the crime scene doesn't feel like a professional hit. A hitman's job is to be efficient. Get in, kill the target, get out. They don't linger. They don't perform rituals. They don't cover mirrors and leave slabs of bacon behind. The Villisca murders were deeply personal and ritualistic. They were the work of someone acting out a private internal fantasy. It wasn't just a job. It was a compulsion. Mansfield doesn't feel right for this. Then there is Reverend George Kelly. Here, the profile starts to click into place. Kelly was a traveling preacher who was in town for the Children's Day services that the Moore family attended on the night of the murders. He was known to be a strange man. He suffered from mental illness and was a confessed peeping Tom. He had a history of sexual obsession with young girls. He even sent obscene letters. He left Villisca on an early morning train hours after the murders were committed. Years later, he would confess to the murders, providing details that were eerily accurate. He described a voice telling him to slay utterly. He later recanted the confession, and he was acquitted after 2 trials. But Kelly fits the profile in so many ways. He was a man struggling with intense sexual repression and perversion, which aligns with the sexual sadism element of the crime. His religious fervor could explain the ritualistic elements. The covered mirrors could be an act against vanity. The washing of his hands could be a form of spiritual purification. The entire act could have been a cleansing in his deluded mind, a divine command to wipe out sin. As a preacher, he would be adept at masking his dark side with a respectable exterior. He would feel like an outsider, a man with a secret life, which aligns with the personality of someone who feels powerless and seeks control through violence. His confession, even if recanted, gives us a glimpse into a mind that could absolutely conceive of such an act. Reverend Kelly is a deeply compelling suspect because he embodies the paradox of the killer, the public face of morality, and the private reality of violent sexual obsession. There is one more strong possibility, the idea that the Villisca killer was a traveling serial killer. A man named Henry Lee Moore, no relation to the victims, was convicted of murdering his mother and grandmother with an axe months after the Villisca crime. His method was strikingly similar. He attacked them while they slept. He used a lamp for light. His crimes were part of a string of similar axe murders that took place across the Midwest around that time. The Midwest axe murderer theory suggests that a single man was moving along the railway lines, killing families in their homes. If Henry Lee Moore, or someone like him, was the Villisca killer, then the motive was not personal at all. The Moore family was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. This type of killer is a predator. He kills for the thrill of it. It's a compulsion, like a drug. The rituals are part of his signature, the way he perfects his craft. This profile is perhaps the most terrifying. It's the profile of a human monster moving through society undetected. He's not a wronged business partner or a crazed preacher. He's a hunter, and people are his prey. He is driven by a need to exert the ultimate power over others. He has no connection to his victims, so he feels no remorse. They are not people to him. They are objects for him to use and discard. This type of killer is very, very hard to catch because his crimes seem random. He leaves no local trail because he has no local life. He just passes through, leaves a wake of destruction, and disappears down the tracks. So what kind of person was he? He was not a simple man. He was a cauldron of contradictions. He was meticulous, yet frenzied. He was patient, yet explosive. He was a man who felt the need to wash his hands, yet had no problem crushing the skull of a child. He was a man who covered his victims' faces, as if in shame, yet staged their bodies for his own private reasons. He was likely a social isolate, not necessarily a hermit, but a man who felt fundamentally separate from other people. He watched them, maybe he even envied them, but he did not feel a part of them. He was a performer wearing a mask of normality to hide the turmoil within. In his day-to-day life, he was probably seen as quiet, maybe a little odd, but not dangerous. Nobody would have looked at him and thought he was capable of such a thing. That was his greatest weapon, his anonymity. He was driven by a deep-seated rage, likely stemming from a childhood of abuse or neglect. This rage was fused with a twisted sexuality. He saw violence as a release, a way to express desires he could not express in any other way. The act of killing was, for him, a moment of transcendence. It was the only time he felt truly alive and powerful. And when he walked out of that house on June 10th, 1912, he was satisfied. He had fulfilled his dark need. He had played God and gotten away with it. He probably took the house key with him as a souvenir, a token of his victory. Then he simply blended back into the world. He might have gotten on a train and left, or he might have just walked home to the other side of town. He might have gone to work the next day and talked with his coworkers about the terrible news. He might have even attended the victims' funerals. The ultimate horror of Villisca is not just what happened, but the fact that the man who did it could be anyone. He was a shadow who slipped into a house, committed an unspeakable act, and slipped back out. He left behind a puzzle made of blood and strange artifacts, a profile of a mind that is barely human. He was a man who had a gaping hole in his soul, and he tried to fill it with the lives of 8 innocent people. And the most chilling fact of all is that we will never know his name. He remains a ghost, a question mark, a testament to the fact that monsters are real, and sometimes they look just like us.